I remember the sound before anything else. The soft hum of the courthouse air vents, the click of polished shoes against marble, the hushed whispers moving like a current around me, and the quiet hiss of oxygen flowing through the small portable tank that hung awkwardly at my side. Fulton County Courthouse, May, 2024, Atlanta, Georgia. The morning sun spilled through tall glass panes, yet my body felt cold, as if the world outside were warm and alive. But I moved through it like a ghost. I had not walked into that building so much as willed my body to stay upright, step after shaky step, gripping the walker until my palms hurt through the bandage wrappings. My ribs burned each breath a negotiation, thin plastic tubing pressing against my bruised cheek, reminding me how close I had come to never breathing at all. 10 days in ICU, 4 more, learning how to sit, then stand, then take small steps. They did not expect me here. Truthfully, neither did I. But I had done harder things surviving. Silence, surviving doubt, surviving the moment I realized people I once called family preferred me gone rather than risk losing control of what they believed should belong to them. The courtroom doors felt enormous, like I was walking into the mouth of something ancient and hungry. My hair still carried the faint medicinal scent of antiseptic, my skin pale from weeks under fluorescent lights, my voice barely more than breath. I did not dress like someone ready for battle, but I carried a determination stronger than steel under my bruises. When I crossed the threshold, every sound seemed to fade, replaced by the steady thump-thump of my heartbeat in my ears. And then I saw her. Victoria Coleman, my stepmother, draped in ivory silk and pearls as if attending a garden charity brunch at the country club instead of a hearing to challenge the estate of the man she once pretended to love. She always carried herself like life owed her something grace without gratitude entitlement disguised as elegance. Today, she held a structured Hermes bag in her manicured hand, a symbol of a life funded by charm and opportunity and ambition sharpened with envy. She turned casually at first, probably expecting her attorney or another social acquaintance. Then, her eyes locked on mine. There was a second where nothing existed between us but recognition and disbelief and fear. Her face drained the confidence gone in an instant, replaced by a trembling shock so raw it almost felt like satisfaction to witness. The bag slipped from her fingers, hitting the floor. Her breath caught a half-gasp, half-choke, and then the sound that would hang in that courtroom like an echo from another world. She screamed. Not a polite, startled gasp, but a visceral, horrified sound, as if she had seen a ghost or something returned from a place she believed it would never escape. Eyes turned, head snapped toward me, my walker scraping against the polished floor, echoing too loudly in a room built for dignity and order. I kept moving each step slow, the pain sharp but welcome, because it reminded me that I was here alive and present and not erased. My voice was barely more than a whisper, but it came out steady. They thought I was gone. They thought the accident, the silence, the hospital walls would be the end. They thought they could take everything without consequence. But I did not die. I did not disappear. I survived, and today I am not the one on trial. A ripple went through the room. Shock, confusion, judgment, curiosity. Cameras clicked, attorneys stiffened, security leaned forward as if expecting some kind of chaos. Victoria pressed a shaking hand to her chest, eyes wide, her lips moving but no sound forming. I watched her mouth struggle to shape words. One whisper, slipping out as fragile as lace you were supposed to be. She could not finish because truth does not always arrive gently. Sometimes it arrives standing bruised and breathing in front of everyone who wished it gone. I paused just a moment long enough to feel the weight of what this meant not just for me, but for anyone who had ever been treated as disposable by the people meant to care. I inhaled slow, and yes, it hurt, but strength sometimes looks like breathing when the world believes you should not anymore. Before I tell you how I survived, before I explain what they did and why this moment is not defeat, but resurrection, tell me something if you are watching from anywhere in the United States or anywhere else in the world. Drop your state or country in the comments and answer me this. Have you ever seen family turn on someone the moment money was involved? Because that is where my story truly begins. Before everything unraveled, I lived a life that could only be described as ordinary in its rhythms and quiet intentions, a life built around early alarms, coffee brewed in my small kitchen off Peachtree Street, and steady hours inside the pulse of Emory Healthcare where I worked in marketing. 40 years old, comfortable, not in wealth but in routine. I cherished the predictability of it all because for once, life felt peaceful after too many years spent fighting storms I did not create. Atlanta in spring has a softness to it. Mornings tinted with gold light drifting across magnolia leaves and the promise of warmth without suffocating heat yet. I liked leaving home early before the city buzzed fully awake, driving past Piedmont Park with the windows cracked just enough to feel the cool air and hear birds that somehow managed to survive urban life just as I had survived mine. At work, I made brochures and patient outreach campaigns, nothing glamorous but meaningful in its way, building communication that helped people find care. People saw me as reliable, calm, a woman who carried herself with gentle authority, someone who knew how to stay composed. They did not know that composure had been carved out of years spent learning when to speak and when silence was safer. I had learned that during my marriage to Daniel Brooks, a polished Wall Street financial type who charmed rooms and cut people down beneath the surface. 5 years together ended in 2022, when I finally saw the pattern of control disguised as concern, the subtle remarks that made me doubt myself, the financial watchfulness, the way he translated success as ownership. He never raised a hand, but words can build cages as surely as steel. Leaving him was not dramatic, just quiet firmness packing my things while he traveled for business, returning the key to the doorman without a note. I chose not to hate him, I simply refused to live in a life where peace required shrinking. Divorce papers were clean property division, straightforward, he kept his Manhattan condo. I returned home to Atlanta to reclaim who I was before I learned to walk on eggshells. Peace mattered more than pride. My father's passing in 2018 reshaped me more deeply than anything else. He had always been steady, a soft-spoken Southern gentleman who believed kindness was strength, not weakness. After my mother died when I was in my 20s, he filled both roles, never remarried until 2015 when Victoria entered the picture. She arrived polished from Palm Beach Circle's diamonds large enough to catch light, even in shade, and a voice dipped in honey with just enough ice to remind you of its strength. She married my father with a smile, but looked at me with calculation. To her, I was not family, I was competition for attention and legacy, the living reminder that a life existed before she arrived. Still I tried. Holidays, birthdays, quiet Sunday dinners. I wanted him to be happy. Even when it was clear she wanted me gone from every moment where she wished to be center stage, I stayed because love sometimes means holding space even when it hurts. When he fell ill, I stayed again, sitting beside him through hospital nights at Emory, where life moved in beeping monitors and whispered prayers, touching his hand, reading him the news when he was too weak to speak. Victoria was gone most of that time, claiming rest cures and wellness retreats at Palm Beach spas, posting photos by pools, while I held ice chips to my father's lips, trying to give comfort he used to give me when fever stole my childhood nights. I never expected anything from his estate. I wanted peace, not property closure, not conflict. And when the will was mentioned, I shrugged, offering to help sort paperwork because loyalty should never be tied to money. The red flags with Victoria did not arrive loudly. They crept in disguised as casual curiosity, like when she once asked casually during brunch what my father's social security number was, feigning interest in handling some charity paperwork for him. Or when she said with practiced ease, "Money belongs with those who know how to use it," and her eyes lingered on me just long enough to make the words feel targeted. I brushed it off. People say strange things when they fear losing control. I told myself she simply guarded her lifestyle and that I was not her enemy. I never imagined that peace could be mistaken for weakness, or that my quiet acceptance of life would one day look like vulnerability to someone who believed wealth was not shared but claimed. Looking back, I see the signs clearly: the way she watched my father's lawyer with interest, the subtle irritation whenever he praised me for helping during his final days, the tension in her jaw at the funeral every time someone mentioned how proud my father was of me. But life does not offer hindsight until the moment you need it most. Before everything, I was simply Avery Coleman, daughter, woman, worker, believer in kindness, trying to live quietly in a world that often rewards noise. I did not know then that silence can be misunderstood, or that simply wanting a peaceful life can make you a target for those who thrive on power. I did not know that the past I thought I had survived prepared me to face a future far darker than I imagined, but I would learn and I would not break. The day everything shifted did not announce itself with thunder. It was a regular Thursday in Buckhead, early May sunlight cutting through the glass towers and azalea bushes still holding on to spring color. I drove to the law office expecting routine estate closure paperwork, nothing more than signatures and condolences. Mr. Harper's office sat on the 11th floor, beige marble lobby, quiet elevators, and a receptionist with a voice so soft it felt like church. I had been here before when my father finalized his will while still healthy, still laughing, still calling me kiddo. Walking down the corridor, my steps slowed, not from fear, but from habit, the weight of memory pressing with each footfall. This place held the last business moments of my father's life. I inhaled, held it, and exhaled like the doctors taught me in rehab when breathing felt like swallowing glass. Mr. Harper's door stood open, framed in dark cherry wood. Inside, shelves of legal books lined the walls and family photos sat neatly behind his desk. He rose when he saw me, tall, silver-haired, dignified, his glasses perched low, a man whose entire presence said quiet truth. "Avery, thank you for coming," he said, voice steady, the kind that has delivered both tragedy and relief through decades. "How are you holding up?" I smiled politely. "The automatic answer ready. I am managing, sir, taking it one day at a time." He nodded as if that was the only acceptable response. "Please sit." I settled into the leather chair, the smell of old paper and polished wood grounding me. He opened a folder, hands slow, deliberate, eyes soft but serious. "Avery, I have reviewed your father's estate distribution," he began, and my breath caught, not from expectation, but from that sudden tension before life bends unexpectedly. "According to his will," he paused, glancing at me as though gauging the steadiness in my bones, "your father left his entire estate to you. Not a portion, not shared the entirety." The words did not land at first. They hovered suspended unreal, like hearing your name called when you are certain no one sees you. I blinked, waiting for correction, waiting for the part where he explained that Victoria and I would split it, or that a trust existed, or that I misunderstood. All of it, I repeated slowly. He nodded, folding his hands, each movement precise. "Your father wrote clearly and without ambiguity. As his only biological child, you inherit 100% of his assets, investments, life insurance, and properties. Total current valuation is approximately $11 million. The room blurred. 11 million. A number so foreign to my life of budgets and grocery coupons, it felt like fiction whispered into a quiet life not meant to hold grand shocks. I did not speak. I could not. My throat tightened, hot tears burned before I gave them permission. My father. He thought of me not in grandeur, but in protection, in faith, in trust. Mr. Harper continued gently, offering time to absorb. "He wanted you taken care of, Avery. He wrote that explicitly. You were his pride and support. It was his wish that you have the resources to live freely without burden. He also noted that Victoria is financially independent and did not require provision." The name Victoria snapped reality back, sharp cold, like plunging into winter water. A memory flashed the funeral day gray sky. Atlanta Drizzle's soft gloves clutched in her manicured hands. The moment someone mentioned Dad had left instructions, she looked at me with a flicker of calculation, a glint I dismissed, then now sharpened by hindsight. She had been certain his world revolved around her. Now certain she would inherit his legacy, his accounts, his home, his life. My tears shifted from grief to something heavier, gratitude mixed with aching love, and a tremor of fear. Because I knew then, without knowing how, that this news was not safety, it was provocation. I wiped my eyes, murmured sorry, embarrassed by emotion, but unable to contain it. Mr. Harper shook his head gently. "There is nothing to apologize for. Loss and blessing sometimes arrive hand in hand." I let out a shaky breath, picturing what this could mean. Not yachts, not designer clothes, no. I pictured a modest cottage near the Blue Ridge Mountains, a garden, fresh herbs, morning tea on a porch, the quiet life I had always wanted but never had the means to build. Starting over on my own terms, healing without counting pennies, breathing without fear. But joy sat beside unease, because wealth invites shadows in people who never noticed light before. Mr. Harper looked at me with earnest gravity, one father figure stepping in for another. I must advise discretion, he said, not unkindly. Until all legal filings are complete and assets transferred, you should avoid discussing this with family, especially Victoria. My heart throbbed once hard. He knew, or at least he suspected the danger in her hunger. His tone carried warning beneath courtesy. She may assume she has a share? He continued. It is best she learns through legal channels, not personal conversation. I nodded slowly, fingers tightening around the edge of the chair. I understood. People reveal themselves fastest when money enters the room, and family reveals itself like a knife when they feel excluded. 11 million. Enough to change my life. Enough to upend hers. The quiet room held the weight of a future shifting the foundation of everything I believed safe. Mr. Harper slid me an envelope with account statements, sealed directions, and his card. Take your time processing, he said gently. You have earned peace, Avery. I swallowed hard emotion thick like honey and grief. Thank you, I whispered. I left the office holding the envelope like fragile glass, stepping into Atlanta sunlight that suddenly felt too bright. My phone buzzed in my bag, and for one split second, pure instinct made me want to call Victoria to share good news because a lifetime of trying to belong is not erased by one revelation. My fingers hovered, then stilled. Good news to the wrong person becomes a weapon. I clutched the bag closer, walked to my car, each breath trembling with shock. Hope and dread braided together. $11 million. Freedom and danger wrapped in the same sentence. Before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you something. Have you ever gotten news so big it did not feel real? I drove back toward Midtown with the envelope still sitting on the passenger seat like a live thing, hot with possibility and danger. Traffic hummed down Peachtree Street, afternoon commuters weaving steady in that ordinary Atlanta rhythm that makes you believe life can be predictable. For the first time since my divorce, I let myself imagine a soft future. A porch, a garden, maybe a dog, mornings without rushing, evenings without loneliness. Hope made me light, floating, reckless enough to pick up my phone when it buzzed with a familiar name. Victoria. The very person Mr. Harper told me not to speak to, yet habit-old wounds and that ache for approval pulled at me like gravity. I didn't answer. But I stared at her name glowing across the screen as if it held a question bigger than money. I put the phone face down, heart tapping fast. Then, against better judgment, or maybe because I still believed in redemption and second chances in the fragile thread between stepmother and daughter, I called her back. The line rang twice. Victoria answered, breathy, sugar-sweet voice like soft velvet. Avery, sweetheart, what a surprise! My chest tightened, suspicion brushing past ribs like a cold fingertip. Hi, Victoria, I said, trying to sound normal even though the air in my car suddenly felt too still. I was near her country club, the polished gates of Chastain glimpsed through trees as the light shifted gold across Buckhead. I thought I should check in. She laughed light, almost musical, that practiced warmth people wear like jewelry. That is very thoughtful, darling. Tell me, how have you been holding up? I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles pale. It was rare for her to ask about my feelings unless someone important was watching. I am doing okay, I said cautiously. Just leaving a meeting with Mr. Harper. Silence for a beat. Not long enough to notice if you weren't listening, but long enough to make my stomach clench. Ah, yes, he is a wonderful man. Your father trusted him deeply. Her tone too polite, too smooth a surface without ripples. Then she shifted like she was leaning forward. Did he go over the estate transition details with you? My pulse jolted. She knew, or she suspected. He said we would go over everything soon. I lied quickly. I almost never lie, especially not to people who enjoy catching truth like prey. But something in her voice, something bright and sharp beneath sugar, told me honesty here was a door best left closed. She hummed a thoughtful sound. Money changes things, Avery. Families, loyalties, even hearts. My chest tightened again, unease slipping quiet and cold down my spine. People imagine wind chimes hearing that kind of tone. I heard a blade being pulled from velvet. I forced a laugh. Well, it is not about money for me. That is good, she cut in softly but firm emphasis landing like a nail. Money belongs with those who know how to use it. It was the same sentence she whispered the night my father died, while I stood holding his hand still warm from living. That night she didn't cry. She adjusted her diamond bracelet and talked about estate planning. I drove in silence for a second car, filling with the hum of tires on asphalt, the world outside glowing with the last hour of sunlight. She broke the quiet first. When life gives someone more than they have ever had, sometimes it blinds them. You understand that, don't you, sweetheart? I swallowed. Yes, I think I do. I said it, but I didn't feel agreement. I felt warning. I felt watched. Her voice dipped lower, gentle on the surface, chilling beneath. You take care this evening, darling. Truly. Warmth laced with command. My throat tightened again. Thank you, Victoria. Talk soon. I hung up fast, air leaving my lungs in a rush. My instincts were screaming, but denial is a stubborn muscle, especially with family. The sun disappeared behind Atlanta towers, shadows stretching long like reaching hands as I merged onto I-85 heading home. Rush hour thinned by dusk. Streetlights flickered alive, dotting the highway in gold. Music, low window, cracked cool night air brushing my cheek. For a few minutes, I let myself breathe. I thought about telling a close friend about the inheritance, about the call, about how my chest felt heavy like someone watching me from a dark room. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I whispered, "Thank you, Dad," under my breath, believing in the love behind the fortune. Then, headlights exploded in my rearview mirror. Too close, too fast. I barely had time to register the shape black SUV grille glinting under highway lights before it slammed into me from behind. The impact punched breath from my body, my car jerking forward, tires screeching, metal screaming against the guardrail. My head snapped forward, then back, pain exploding white behind my eyes. I tried to steer, but another hit came harder, violent, purposeful. Not an accident, deliberate. My car spun lights, blurring the world, tilting sky and concrete trading places. The sound of crushing steel filled my ears, horn blaring, my hands shaking, trying to grip the wheel, trying to stay conscious. The SUV didn't stop. It hovered half a second in my peripheral dark-tinted windows, nothing visible inside, just shadow intent, cold and final. Then it accelerated, disappearing into the night while I slid toward the barrier and the world broke open around me. My car hit concrete and everything inside me screamed. Bones snapped, breath vanished, metal twisted around me like a cage. I tried to call out, but no sound came, just choking air pain searing like fire under my skin. Outside, headlights passed indifferent, Atlanta night rushing on. I tasted blood, metallic thick warmth spilling down my neck. My fingers trembled against the seatbelt buckle, but my arm wouldn't move my vision, narrowing edges darkening. Someone. Help! My voice barely air, barely thought. Cars kept moving. No one knew I was braking in the dark. Traffic noise roared, then faded distant like ocean waves far away. A single highway light flickered above, casting pale gold across shattered glass. My breath shallow, each inhale a knife. I heard my own heartbeat slow, heavy, echoing in my skull, like the world drifting underwater. My voice returned in a whisper, trembling, cracked. Help! Please! Someone! Tires finally squealed another car, stopping a voice shouting, a woman, I think calling 911, footsteps rushing. Hold on! Stay with me! But the world slid away, soft and black, the stars smudging out overhead. And all I could think, as Atlanta lights blurred into nothing, was one truth colder than the night air. This was not fate. Someone wanted me gone, and they almost got exactly what they wanted. When consciousness returned, it did not come gently. It tore its way in jagged pieces through haze and pain and the suffocating weight of machines. I woke not to warmth or voices or relief, but to the sound of air hissing through a ventilator tube and the relentless beep, beep, beep that insisted I was still here, whether I wanted to be or not. Grady Memorial Hospital ICU. The ceiling above me was a blur of fluorescent light, harsh and sterile. My body felt like shattered glass held together by tape and desperation. My chest burned with every tiny breath, ribs screaming with the memory of metal crushing bone. A tube sat in my throat, forcing air into me while my lungs refused to cooperate. Something in my left side stabbed with every heartbeat, sharp as lightning. Voices swirled around me, but none belonged to family. None belonged to anyone who loved me. Machines beeped, doctors murmured, nurses moved with urgency, but I was a silent observer, trapped inside broken skin. I didn't yet understand I had been unconscious for 10 days. I didn't know bones had been reset, ribs stabilized, tubes placed. I didn't yet know the world had kept moving while I was suspended between living and leaving. But what I did know in those first seconds was simple and absolute. I was not safe. Fear arrived before understanding, sharp, cold, primitive. No one touched my hand. No loved one leaned close. No soft voice whispered, "I'm here." When the sedation eased more fully, my eyelids fought the brightness until shapes came into focus. A nurse leaned over, adjusting the ventilator settings, eyes gentle behind thin frames. She saw mine open and smiled softly. "Well, hello there, sweetheart. Welcome back." I tried to speak, but the tube silenced me, choking the word behind plastic and air pressure. Panic surged my chest, heaving uselessly against the machine. "Shh, do not fight the tube," she whispered, hand resting lightly on my arm, grounding me. "You've been through a lot. You need to let your body breathe for you right now." Her voice was low, calm, practiced, like she had said these words to souls returning from dark places before. I blinked, tears forming from pain, from fear, from the primal terror of waking alone. 10 days, the nurse continued, gently reading the panic in my eyes. "You've been here 10 days." I shook inside. 10 days. A lifetime in hospital hours. And where was anyone who claimed to care for me in the world outside these walls? I drifted in and out of shallow sleep over the next hours, time a blur of alarms, soft voices, and cold light. When the breathing tube finally came out, pain ripped through my throat like I had swallowed razor wire. My first breath without it was thin, ragged, and terrifyingly small. A respiratory tech coached me through slow inhalations, oxygen tube now resting beneath my nose. Every inhale felt like fire, every exhale like falling. When I could finally whisper, a nurse asked gently, "Do you have any family we should call for you?" The air in the room stilled. Family. The word felt foreign, sharp, heavy with betrayal. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say my stepmother or someone, anyone but memory slammed into me, sudden and brutal. Victoria's honey-dipped voice. Money changes things. The SUV in the dark. Metal crushing bone. A life leaving my body while headlights passed without stopping. I opened my mouth, but the only sound was a quiet rasp. "No." The nurse frowned, not unkindly. "No one. Not even a friend." I blinked slowly. I had friends, but not the kind who come running at midnight to sit vigil in an ICU. I had a life, but not a net. The nurse nodded with a softness that told me she wasn't judging. She simply understood in a way only hospital workers do. Being alone isn't unusual here. Some people just don't have someone who shows up. Her hand squeezed mine before she left. Her kindness almost hurt more than the pain in my body. Over the next days, fragments returned in shards. The phone call. Victoria's silky tone. "Take care." The SUV headlights. The impact like a fist from God. My body remembered even before my mind could catch up. Physical pain was constant, sharp in ribs, deep in back stitches, pulling at skin IV lines, tugging each time I shifted. Time in ICU moved slow and merciless. Morning rounds, Night checks, vitals, blood draws, respirations, whispered notes clipped shoes across tile. I watched families fill neighboring rooms holding hands, bringing flowers, smoothing blankets. No one walked in for me. On the fourth day after waking, a young admin entered clipboard in hand. Ms. Coleman, we had some issues with your account. We attempted to charge the card on file, but there have been multiple fraud alerts. My blood chilled. Fraud alerts. Card on file. Wallet. I tried to speak voice raw. My wallet. An accident car. The admin flipped her page brows, furrowing. Actually, someone signed it out the night you arrived. Said they were family. A pause. We have it logged. Would you like security to pull the footage? Ice slid down my spine. Yes, I rasped. Every breath stabbed, but fury kept me upright. The footage wasn't available until later that evening, but the admin returned, eyes widened like she had seen a ghost. A younger man came to get it, she whispered quietly. Said he was your relative. Looked mid-30s, fancy clothes. Security will print the still for you tomorrow. I felt every cell in my body freeze. Chase. Victoria's son. That smug, always polished smirk always posted on Instagram near yachts rented, not owned. Chase, who once laughed when I tripped at a charity gala whispering gold digger under his breath. My stomach twisted. They thought I would die. And they didn't come to hold my hand. They came to take my wallet. Later, a bank text pushed through to my phone once returned shattered but operable. Suspicious charges. Gucci. Phipps Plaza. $5,000. The world narrowed, the room shrinking around me. They were spending my life while believing I was losing it. A laugh rose in my chest, painful, raw, bitter. It wasn't funny, but it came anyway because the alternative was screaming. That night, a new nurse came in night shift, quiet authority radiating from her frame. She was mid-50s, maybe late 50s, warm brown skin, gentle, tired eyes with depth that suggested she had seen life at its worst and still chose kindness. Her badge read, Jackie Simmons, RN. She adjusted my blankets without speaking, sensing discomfort before I said it. You're safe here, honey, she murmured, voice soft but firm enough to build walls around fear. Then she studied my face long enough to know I was not sleeping, just pretending. You got people out there, she asked softly. It wasn't accusation, just a question from someone who knew the cruel math of hospital rooms. I swallowed. I thought I did. Jackie nodded, slow understanding settling into the space between us. Some folks only love you when it benefits them, she whispered. But life has a funny way of showing you who's real when you're laid up like this. She adjusted my oxygen gently. You're still here. That means your story ain't done. Her words rested on me like a blanket I didn't know I needed. I closed my eyes, tears hot but silent. Betrayal hurts worst when it carries your last name. On the fifth morning awake, a social worker came with a printout. The still frame captured Chase at the nurse's station designer jacket hair, perfect, telling staff he was here for my belongings. My body reacted before thought did, a tremor moving through me, deep instinctive rage masked as fear. My voice cracked. He took my wallet. Social worker nodded, lowering her voice. And whoever used that card didn't waste time. One charge at luxury store before hospital even processed intake. Someone wanted your things secured fast. Translation clear. They planned a future where I didn't wake up. A chill rolled through me. It was one thing to suspect. It was another to see proof in crisp printed paper. The hours crawled after that fear and hurt, melting into something more solid, colder, sharper. They wanted me gone. They tried. But I was still breathing. Each painful inhale felt like rebellion. When the room dimmed for nighttime and machines hummed low, Jackie returned, smoothing my sheets, humming a hymn under her breath. I turned my head toward her voice, raw whisper escaping. Why would family do that? She didn't sugarcoat. Baby, sometimes blood ain't loyalty. Sometimes blood is liability. You survived something they didn't expect you to. That means you still have power. I let that settle inside like a seed dropped in scorched earth. Power. Broken, but breathing was still power. Before she left, she squeezed my hand, gentle but firm. If someone wanted you gone, who would you call first? I didn't answer. because the truth sat heavy in my chest. The people I once would have called might have been the ones who sent me to that highway in the first place. I closed my eyes against the pale hospital light and made myself a quiet promise. If I ever walked out of this room again, I wouldn't crawl for anyone. I would rise, and they would learn what it meant to try to bury the wrong woman. The morning they finally moved me from ICU to a step-down unit, I thought the worst was behind me. I thought waking up with machines breathing for me and discovering that someone I once called family had watched me bleed in the dark was the lowest point a life could touch. I was wrong. The true betrayal wasn't the SUV. It was what came after. The nurse rolled my bed through double doors into a quieter wing, pale yellow walls trying too hard to soften reality. I could breathe without tubes now, but every breath still scraped like sandpaper. Every shift in bed pulsed pain through my ribs. The world felt slower, heavier, and painfully clear. I stared at my phone, cracked like I was dried blood, still trapped in the grooves. 10 days. 10 days unconscious. 10 days where anyone who cared should have come. My thumb trembled as I unlocked the screen. No missed calls, no messages. A single notification sat there like a ghost voicemail from Victoria. For a second, my heart foolishly lifted. Maybe she had called hospitals. Maybe she had been worried. Maybe the voice in my head whispering danger had been trauma, not truth. I pressed play. Her voice poured out syrupy soft, the performative warmth of Southern grace dipped in steel. "Avery, darling, it's Victoria. I heard something happened and I hope you're all right. I'm sure you're strong enough to get through it. Call when you can. Stay strong, honey." Then a click. No panic. No, "Where are you?" No. "Avery, what happened?" No trembling breath of someone afraid for your life. Just "Stay strong, honey," like she was offering motivational quotes from a beach yoga class. My stomach twisted, but I swallowed the bitterness trying to believe she didn't know how bad it was. Trying to believe there was innocence somewhere in all of this. Then I tapped her Instagram out of habit before sense caught up. Her page loaded slowly. There she was. Sun-kissed, skin champagne flute, raised diamonds catching light. Caption, Palm Beach Charity Gala. Doing good for those who need it most. #blessed. Posted 2 days after my crash. While I lay with a tube down my throat and a machine breathing for me, she was smiling at a silent auction and rubbing shoulders with donors. I stared so long my vision blurred. Betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it arrives in gold-rimmed glasses and curated captions. A tremor moved through me, my fingers tightening around the phone. My chest ached, not from injury, but from realization. She hadn't been worried. She hadn't rushed to the hospital. She hadn't sat by my bed or called again. She posted a gala photo, and she had told me to be careful the very night someone tried to erase me from asphalt. My phone buzzed suddenly in my hand, jolting me. Fraud alert. Suspicious charge. Gucci Phipps Plaza, Atlanta. $5,000. Another Beverly Hills hotel charges. My heart slammed against cracked ribs as if trying to break free. Beverly Hills. They weren't just celebrating. They were spending. Luxuriously. Boldly. Confident she would not need to hide it because in their mind, I was gone. I stared at the screen, each beep hitting me harder than the SUV had. I whispered no without realizing, breath shaky and thin. It wasn't enough they planned to erase me. They were spending my life before the dirt settled. The room seemed to tilt, nausea rising hard and fast. I hit the nurse call button with a trembling hand. Jackie appeared seconds later, like she had been waiting for the world to break again. "You all right, honey?" Her voice low, calm, sharp as truth. I turned the phone toward her. "They're using my cards." She looked jaw tightening the way nurses do when anger and heartbreak flash at once. "Let me get security," she said quietly, already halfway out the door. Security printed the photo within an hour. They slid it across the tray table like evidence in a courtroom. It showed Chase, mid-30s, perfectly styled hair, luxury jacket hanging careless on his shoulders, sunglasses inside like his eyes couldn't bear the indignity of eye contact with reality. Chase, who calls himself a crypto investor, though no one ever saw profits. Chase, who once told me some people aren't meant for money, they collapse under the weight of wealth. Chase, smiling slightly at the nurse desk, signing his name like he was picking up dry cleaning. Chase retrieving my belongings the night I came in, bleeding, believing I would never wake to claim them. Something inside me cracked, not bone this time, but the last thread holding my hope that this was misunderstanding, not malice. My voice didn't shake when I spoke, though my whole body trembled. He came here. He took my things. Jackie placed a firm hand on my arm. Baby, you listen to me. People show who they are when they think you can't stand back up. I stared at the print at his easy posture, like the world already belonged to him. Rage did not explode. It simmered low, steady quiet, cold. Betrayal hollowed out the pain and left steel in its place. They thought I was gone. They thought the money was theirs. They thought I was weak. I lay back against the stiff pillow body, aching, but purpose settling deep in my bones. No one had sat by my side. No one held vigil. But they came to steal before they came to grieve. That is not family. That is threat. I closed my eyes and felt the truth settle heavy but clear. They didn't just abandon me. They counted on me disappearing. And now they would learn what it meant to miscount. The machines hummed, the hospital lights glowed cold, and I breathed through pain and anger and clarity. I wasn't done. They thought they had written the final chapter, but I was the one still breathing. And they were about to find out breathing was enough to fight. Let me ask you one thing, because this is where everything changed for me. If someone wanted you gone, who would you call first? The first morning I could sit up without feeling like my ribs were shattering. I called Mr. Harper. My fingers shook as I typed his number, not from weakness anymore, but from something colder, sharper, a quiet storm settling beneath my skin. The phone rang twice, then his voice filled the speaker warm and familiar. Avery. His tone froze mid-sentence like his mind couldn't reconcile the sound he was hearing. My dear God, you're alive! I almost laughed at the raw shock in his voice. I'm here, I whispered, breath thin but steady. And I need your help. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't waste time on shock. Real lawyers know when silence is dignity. How soon can I see you? He asked. I looked down at the blanket covering my bruised legs, my chipped nails, my body still stitched together like fragile thread. When they let me out, I said. He exhaled like relief, but beneath it urgency. I'll arrange transport if needed. You focus on breathing. His calm steadiness made my throat tighten. After we ended the call, I sat there tethered to oxygen IV lines still snaking into my skin and felt the shift like I wasn't a passive victim anymore, but a quiet avalanche gathering momentum. A week later, discharged with ribs taped and a walker still at my side, I entered Harper's Buckhead office again. This time, I didn't float with hope. I carried pain carved into bone betrayal, burned into memory, and a purpose sharp enough to cut. When he saw me, he stood abruptly, eyes wide. Avery, he whispered. You look, I know. I said softly, not unkind. Alive. He nodded slowly. Yes, that. And something else. Something stronger. I sat across from him, movements careful, breath measured. He closed the door gently, like sealing a vault. Tell me everything he said. I told him about the call, the cryptic warning, the SUV, the hospital silence, the credit charges, Chase walking out with my wallet like I was already gone. His jaw tightened with each detail, his normally composed face shifting into something that looked like quiet fury. When I finished, there was a long silence. Finally he spoke, voice low. Avery, what happened to you was not random. I nodded once. I know. He stood, went to a filing cabinet, and pulled a folder with my father's estate papers. There is something I must tell you now that you are here. He slid a document toward me. Victoria filed an emergency competency petition last week to assume control of your inheritance. My heart dropped, cold breath catching. Competency. As if I were incapable. As if I were gone. She submitted medical declarations claiming you were incapacitated beyond meaningful recovery. She expected you not to return. I stared at the words stamped across the page, black ink colder than any hospital night. They had already moved to take everything legally, assuming the road had done the rest. My skin chilled. This wasn't impulsive greed. This was a plan. Harper pressed a button on his desk phone. "Send in Ms. Lee, please." The door opened, and in walked a woman who carried herself like she had never lost a battle she intended to win. Sandra Lee, mid-50s, sharp eyes, sharper posture, hair pinned back with precision suit, dark navy-like armor, and presence that filled the room without raising a voice. Harper gestured. "Avery, this is attorney Sandra Lee. She specializes in estate protection elder exploitation law," and he paused, then finished deliberately removing predatory parties from financial power. Sandra sat palms together, assessing me not with pity, but with clean, unwavering focus. "I hear someone tried to get rid of you and take what is rightfully yours," she said plainly. No sugarcoat, no hesitation. I nodded. She leaned forward slightly. "Then let me be very clear. This isn't a family dispute. What happened to you looks like attempted elimination and estate interference." That phrase landed in my chest like a gavel. Attempted elimination. She didn't have to say the harsher word. I nodded again, breath slow, body stiff. Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the simple act of saying yes to truth. "I want the competency petition blocked immediately," she continued. "We will request full investigative review, emergency injunction, and asset freeze so no funds shift, and we will notify the court that the beneficiary," she held my gaze, "is alive, conscious, and in recovery." A strange mix of relief and rage flared inside me. For the first time since I woke on that ventilator, I felt something like safety. Sandra's voice softened just slightly. "You are the legal heir. That gives you leverage. What they attempted gives you standing, and your survival gives you power." I exhaled shakily, chest aching. Harper cleared his throat. "Victoria will not expect this. She believes the narrative she created." Sandra's lips tightened. "Let her. Surprise is a weapon." She turned to me. "We will build a case with medical records, police logs, highway footage, financial alerts, security stills from the hospital, and witness testimony." She did not say Chase's name. She didn't need to. I nodded. "And while we gather evidence," Sandra continued, "you rest, you heal. But understand this, there will be a hearing soon. You will need to appear." My stomach tightened. Appear. Public. Fragile body under courtroom lights. But I didn't flinch. "I've already survived worse," I said quietly. Harper's eyes softened with something that looked like pride. Sandra gave one approving nod. "Good. Fight quietly until we strike loudly." As I left the office later, walker slow against polished floors, my ribs aching with each step, something inside me shifted. I was not powerless. I was not erased. I was not prey crawling out of a crash. I was a woman they underestimated. A woman coming back with law as armor and truth as witness. Outside the building, the Atlanta heat pressed thick and real. The world looked the same, but I wasn't. They tried to bury me, but I woke up. And now every breath, every painful step, every heartbeat was reclamation. They thought money changed people. They were right. It changed me. It turned me from quiet into unstoppable. And soon, they were going to learn exactly what it means to fail at taking someone's life and still have to face her. Rehab didn't feel like healing at first. It felt like humiliation. It felt like being trapped in a body that no longer obeyed lungs, that forgot how to expand legs, that trembled beneath the weight of survival. The first time I stood without support, the world tilted and I swayed, gripping the parallel bars like a ship rail in a storm breath, sharp and shallow pain flaring through ribs and spine. The therapist counted softly, 1, 2, 3, as if numbers could hold me upright. My legs shook, my palms sweated, my vision spotted black at the edges, but I did not fall. I refused. Each step was less a movement and more a declaration. I am here. I am still here. The machines hummed around me, wheelchairs rolled. Nurses passed with clipboards and gentle eyes, but all I heard was my own breath steadying my own heartbeat, regaining rhythm. Jackie watched, sometimes leaning against the doorway, arms crossed expression, that blend of stern and soft only nurses seem to master. "Don't rush, honey," she'd remind me, voice even. "Strength comes quiet before it comes loud." I nodded, focusing every ounce of will into one foot, then the other legs, trembling like newborn foal limbs, fragile but determined. Pain was constant, but so was purpose. And purpose always wins when pain tries to own you. When I rested, she pulled up a chair beside me, her presence steady like an anchor. "People think healing is about getting back to who you were," she said, eyes on me, "but it's about becoming someone new, someone who knows what you survived." I swallowed against rising emotion. I didn't feel strong. I felt broken, held together by tape and stubbornness. But she saw something in me I couldn't yet name. Meanwhile, Sandra moved like a storm disguised in quiet silk. Every day she texted updates, short, efficient lines. Hospital footage secured. Card transactions retrieved. Highway incident report requested. Vehicle trace underway. Conservatorship petition frozen. Every message a brick in the wall between me and the people who wanted me gone. Strength didn't look like what I imagined. It wasn't fire. It wasn't screaming. It was paperwork, legal filings, evidence chains, and a team who refused to let injustice breathe. Harper checked in too, always formal, always kind, reminding me to conserve energy while he prepared to unleash his. While I learned to breathe without wincing, Sandra learned how deep the rot ran. Her voice on the phone one night was calm but edged with steel. "They moved quickly, Avery. Too quickly. Almost as if they knew timelines ahead of time." I closed my eyes, breathing slowly, chest tightening. Premeditation hid in speed. Intent hides in certainty. The world outside the hospital kept spinning. Atlanta nights filled with warm patio dinners and dog walkers and cars humming down Peachtree, unaware someone inside a recovery room prepared to return not as victim, but as a reckoning. And while I rebuilt, Victoria celebrated. Word traveled even when I didn't seek it. A volunteer at the hospital overheard staff mentioning my name and whispered she had seen Victoria last weekend at Chastain Park Club, laughing, champagne flute in hand, bragging that she finally had clarity over financial matters. She didn't know I had already woken up. She didn't know someone from her world overheard her say some people don't know how to handle fortune and sometimes money is safest where it's appreciated. They laughed, clinked glasses, unaware someone nearby recognized my name and recognized the cruelty beneath her tone. That witness would matter later. In rehab, standing at the bars, I pictured her white dress and perfect manicure and empty sympathy voicemail, and I took another step. And another. Pain flared, but rage steadied me. Justice steadied me. The memory of silent monitors and empty visitor chairs steadied me. Jackie handed me water, raising a brow impressed. "That's what getting up looks like," she murmured. "Not just the body, baby. The spirit, too." Nights were hardest. The hospital dimmed lights, but machines still beeped and grief came soft like fog. I cried quietly sometimes, not from weakness, but released the weight of betrayal heavy, the ache of ribs matched by the ache of realizing the family I wanted didn't exist. And each time I cried, I wiped my own tears. No one was coming to comfort me, and somehow that made me stronger. On the 9th night, reform breathing exercises nearly impossible, I whispered into the silence, half prayer, half promise. They don't get to write my ending. The next morning I took 10 steps instead of 6. By the second week, 15. I practiced standing without gripping the rails, practiced inhaling without flinching, practiced being someone risen, not rescued. Jackie sat beside me during breathing therapy one afternoon, humming faintly like she could stitch courage into air. "You know what I admire most," she said, not glancing at me. "You didn't vanish. Most folks disappear inside hurt, but you're dragging yourself out, inch by inch, even when it burns." I smiled weakly, voice rough. "I'm not dragging out. I'm walking out." She grinned, slow, proud. There she is. By the time the discharge date came, I still hurt. I still trembled, but I could stand. I could breathe. I could move with purpose, not fear. The hospital doors slid open and I stepped out into Atlanta air, new light hitting my face, warm, soft, alive. I wasn't fully healed, but I was upright. Upright is enough to fight. And while Victoria toasted imaginary victories under chandeliers, I practiced survival under fluorescent lights. Let her celebrate. Let her believe she had won. She didn't know recovery was not retreat. Recovery was preparation. Power comes in phases. First, you survive. Then you stand. Then you strike. And I had just learned to stand again. So let me ask you this, because this is the moment I realized my life shifted for good when someone tries to break you. Do you stay down, or do you rise until they can't pretend you're gone anymore? Leaving the hospital felt unreal, like stepping out of a war zone without hearing the ceasefire. The automatic doors slid open and sunlight washed over me, warm but startling after weeks under fluorescent bulbs. I expected relief, but what came instead was awareness. Every breath still hurt, every rib still felt wired to a memory of impact, every step whispered, "Careful now," but I walked out anyway. They cleared me 2 weeks earlier than projected. Determination is its own medicine. The wheelchair they offered stayed behind. I moved slow, steady legs, remembering strength one quiet muscle at a time. Outside, Sandra's security detail waited, 2 of them, stationed discreetly near the exit suits, sharp eyes, sharper. One nodded when he saw me, a silent acknowledgement I wasn't prey anymore. Sandra insisted on protection. When someone tries to erase you once she told me, you assume they'd try again. Quiet rage wrapped in courtesy. The car door opened and I slid in, a little stiff breath, shallow but controlled. The city moved around us, people living unaware that someone who should have disappeared was sitting upright in the back seat, holding both pain and purpose like twin passengers. First stop wasn't home. It was a boutique Sandra's assistant recommended. I walked inside, supported by nothing but will and the faint ache of healing bone. The saleswoman smiled politely, eyes doing that fast scan that reads frailty, then uncertainty. I stood straighter, wincing only slightly. "I need a suit," I said. "Something strong. Something that doesn't apologize for existing." She studied me longer this time, saw something past the bruises, past the pale skin, past the noticeable effort behind each inhale. She brought me a dark red pantsuit, deep crimson, almost wine like old blood and rebirth stitched into fabric. I changed slowly, ribs protesting each movement, but when I buttoned the jacket, something shifted. The woman in the mirror wasn't broken. She wasn't begging to survive. She looked like fire that had learned restraint, like someone who had died in someone else's narrative but walked back into her own. I smoothed the fabric and whispered to my reflection, "I am not gone." The words tasted like truth. The clerk didn't comment, but when she handed me the garment bag, her hand covered mine, briefly, strong, warm, respectful. Next came home, not my old condo, but a temporary security-managed apartment Sandra arranged. Neutral walls, quiet hallways, anonymity as protection. I slept that first night without machines, without nurses, without footsteps echoing down sterile corridors. And when morning came, I stood watching sunlight crawl across the room, and for the first time in weeks, I did not wake to panic. I woke to purpose. The next day, I asked the driver to take a route, not to anywhere specific, to a memory. I wanted to see the street where I nearly ended, not to relive it, but to reclaim it. We drove slow along I-85, the skyline rising behind us. Every curve of the road familiar, now carved into muscle memory. When we reached the exit near Peachtree, my breath caught, and for a moment the sound of screeching metal and crunching glass echoed in my ribs. The air tasted metallic again, heart-thudding like before, monitors and tubes. But this time I wasn't trapped. This time I wasn't alone. I placed my hand on the glass window, fingers trembling but steadying with each breath. They thought the crash killed me. Slowly I decided to resurrect myself. I didn't hate the place. I didn't fear it. It was simply where an old version of me ended and another began. Resurrection isn't a single moment. It's every inhale after the first one that hurt to take. It's every step on legs that once forgot function. It's choosing not to vanish when vanishing would have been easier and expected. After the highway, we drove by my old condo building. The doorman looked up, saw me through the glass, and his mouth fell open, one hand lifting to his chest. I smiled, small but real, the way someone looks when they see a ghost, except I wasn't haunting. I was returning. The city looked the same, but I didn't fit inside its past edges anymore. I wasn't that quiet version who apologized for existing, who let people invent stories about strength and weakness. Silence didn't protect me. Being polite didn't save me. Rising did. A text from Sandra buzzed. They do not know you're out yet. Stay silent until the court date. Let them believe what they need to. Surprise is strategy. I typed back one word. Agreed. Because this wasn't reaction anymore. This was strategy. This was preparation for reckoning. That evening, I sat in front of a mirror, brushing hair still thin from hospital days, tracing the faint bruises on my collarbone healing but visible like a map of survival. I practiced standing without wobbling shoulders, back chin level. I practiced breathing through pain without letting it show. I practiced walking the way someone walks who refuses to be erased. I thought of Victoria clinking glasses at charity events on manicured lawns, believing life had handed her victory. I thought of Chase wearing designer jackets, spending my money before the hospital sheets even cooled beneath my body. They built a future on the assumption that I would not return. I was going to show them what it felt like to face what you buried. At dusk, I stepped onto the apartment balcony overlooking Atlanta lights blinking alive one by one. Somewhere beneath those lights, someone celebrated thinking they had succeeded. And somewhere beneath those same lights, I inhaled stiff but sure, and whispered a promise not to them, but to myself. I am coming back fully, not crawling, not begging, not broken, reborn. And when I walk into that courtroom, every breath I take will be proof that they failed. Then I smiled, slow, sharp quiet, like a storm deciding where to break. Revenge wasn't the goal. Justice was. And justice carries a calmer wrath sharper than rage and colder than fear. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the night settle around me soft and certain. Resurrection wasn't loud. It was breath. It was choice. It was the steady return of someone who refused to stay buried. Tomorrow, I would train again. Tomorrow, I would practice walking longer without pain. Tomorrow, I would hold power not like armor, but like truth. And when the day came to face them, they wouldn't see a ghost. They would see the woman they tried to erase standing in the light, very much alive, very much risen. The courthouse felt colder the second time I arrived, as if the air conditioning had been set for ghosts or for truths that cut sharper than winter wind, and maybe both lived there that morning. I stood outside the Fulton County Courthouse leaning on my cane, breath, shallow ribs tender beneath the dark red suit jacket that felt like armor stitched from every quiet ounce of defiance I had left. The city buzzed outside as if the world was ordinary, but inside these walls, destinies tilted lives, fractured reputations, shattered. I drew one steady breath and whispered to myself, not dramatic, not loud, just fact. I am not a victim. I am a witness to what they tried to erase. The doors opened heavy and slow guards eyeing me with surprise and recognition because they had seen me weeks ago. Pale, bruised, fragile, arriving like a broken promise. Now I returned, not whole, but unbroken. Inside, marble echoed each careful step. Murmurs rose low ripples of curiosity as heads turned and whispers traveled fast like wind skimming water. Is that her? I thought she was gone. She looks like she crawled out of a grave. I did. Not physically, but spiritually. I earned every breath I took in that building. Sandra walked beside me, calm, steady elegance in motion, a force disguised in quiet posture. Her eyes flicked across the room, noting every expression, every shift, every detail with surgical precision. She leaned in voice barely above a whisper. You stand, we win. That is all you need to do today. I nodded once, throat tight. We passed a cluster of reporters, their eyes widening, cameras lifting, every lens drawn toward my bruises fading but visible toward the oxygen tank slung discreetly behind me toward the woman who refused to die quietly. The courtroom doors opened and the world slowed. Victoria sat at the front row, silk dress, immaculate pearls, perfect posture hair in soft waves, makeup done like a morning TV host, on the day she planned to celebrate a public victory. She whispered with her attorney, Preston Hale, a sleek man with the practiced confidence of someone who believed laws bent for those who paid enough for them. He smirked in a way that made my stomach twist because he expected to win, expected me to be weak, expected me to crumble. Victoria smiled at a woman beside her, laughing softly, like this was a brunch table, not a court of law. Then she turned. Her eyes landed on me, and the air changed. Her face drained, all warmth, vanished diamond smile cracking porcelain. Her hand raised instinctively to her throat, fingers pressing pearls the way some people press rosary beads when they fear judgment. A sound escaped her half-gasp, half-strangled cry, like she was choking on her own disbelief. No, no, that can't be. She stood so quickly, her chair scraped the floor sharp like a blade across glass. You were supposed to. She clamped her mouth mid-sentence, realization hitting her too late that she had nearly confessed her intent in front of cameras and witnesses. The room froze, then erupted in murmurs. Flashbulbs popped, security shifted forward. Reporters leaned in like bloodhounds catching scent. Sandra placed a gentle hand on my arm, grounding me, reminding me that silence could cut deeper than rage. I kept walking, each step deliberate, my cane tapping softly, like a countdown to reckoning. The judge, a silver-haired man with eyes like polished steel, watched me approach, eyebrows raised, not in pity, but in awe and gravity. Ms. Coleman, the court acknowledges your presence. Please take your seat. I lowered myself slowly into the chair beside Sandra, biting back a wince because pain is temporary but dignity lasts. The bailiff called order, hammer striking wood, echoing like thunder. Preston Hale rose, smooth voice dripping condescension. Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Coleman seeks rightful control of the estate due to the unfortunate incapacitation of Miss Avery Coleman. He choked on my name, glancing toward me like seeing a ghost crawling out of a grave. Alive, breathing, listening. The judge raised one brow slightly. Incapacitation, you say? He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Miss Coleman, do you appear incapacitated to this court? I pushed to my feet slowly, pain threading every muscle but will stronger than bone. No, Your Honor, I murmured. I am standing, I am present, I am alive. Gasps rippled across the room, hushed voices saying she survived like a prayer or a shock. Sandra approached the podium, calm, poised voice, resonant with quiet power. Your Honor, this is not a competency hearing. This is an exposure of deception, manipulation, and an attempt to seize assets belonging to the rightful heir. She clicked the remote, and the first slide glowed across the courtroom screen. Crash scene photos, twisted. Metal emergency lights, fractured asphalt, my broken car like a coffin cracked open. Gasps echoed again. Sandra continued. Miss Coleman was struck intentionally by a vehicle registered to a rental account used by Mr. Chase Coleman, the stepson of petitioner Mrs. Victoria Coleman. The room shifted like gravity bent. Preston stuttered, Object, Your Honor, speculation. The judge lifted a hand. Not yet, Mr. Hale. Proceed, Ms. Lee. Sandra's next slide showed rental paperwork license trace timestamp cross-referenced with my crash report time. Next came bank logs, Gucci Phipps Plaza, Beverly Hills, transactions signed digitally by Chase. The same night I lay unconscious in trauma bay, the room hissed collective intake of shock. Even reporters lowered notepads, stunned into silence. Sandra's voice sharpened into steel. They did not visit. They did not call. They did not seek welfare. They only sought access. The screen changed again. Hospital footage. Freeze frame of Chase at the nurse station signing for my belongings. Smirk, clear arrogance, bold enough to believe life had already left my body. A woman in the gallery let out a quiet, "Oh, Lord." Victoria's face collapsed, tiny tremor starting in her lip, eyes, wild darting, trying to find escape, but no exits existed in truth. Preston's jaw tightened, sweat visible at his temple. The judge leaned forward, voice lower, colder. Mrs. Coleman, do you wish to explain why your son accessed the belongings of someone you believed incapacitated? Silence stretched long and taut before Victoria sputtered. He was checking. He wanted to make sure her personal effects were secure. Sandra lifted another page. Conservatorship petition, time-stamped the day after my crash, notarized in Palm Beach, her signature crisp. The judge exhaled slow disappointment radiating like heat. Mrs. Coleman, you filed to claim control of assets before medical status was confirmed. That is highly irregular. Victoria's hands shook pearls, rattling soft as her voice broke thin, fragile. Your Honor. I was frightened. I was afraid she. She could not finish. The truth hovered unfinished, heavy enough to crush. Sandra didn't need to twist the knife. The evidence bled loud enough. Then came the moment no script could improve. Sandra clicked again, and the screen flashed with Chase at the Beverly Hills Hotel valet designer suit, laughing phone, lifted like he was documenting celebration, not fraud, timestamp stamped with cruel precision. Same day, I lay in hospital machines, breathing for me. Gasps, murmurs. A single woman whispered low, "Bless her, she deserved better." The judge turned to security, voice firm. Detain Mr. Chase Coleman pending fraud investigation and review of events surrounding the highway incident. Officers moved toward the aisle where Chase sat pale shaking, trying to disappear into polished wood and expensive suit fabric. But truth holds its own spotlight. Victoria reached for him, voice cracking. No, wait, he didn't. Her hand trembling, grasping air. Not salvation. Officers led him out as cameras flashed like lightning and whispers boiled into disbelief and righteous fury. Sandra stepped back, letting silence settle, the kind that weighs heavier than any gavel. I rose again, slow breath, steady cane firm in my hand. I did not speak to Victoria. I did not need to. My presence spoke louder than accusation. The judge looked at me, eyes steady, solemn. Miss Coleman, the court recognizes you as rightful beneficiary and affirms your capacity. The petition is dismissed. You may pursue civil and criminal action at your discretion. I nodded, throat-thick, eyes burning, but no tears fell, because victory sometimes feels like quiet, like breath, like survival sharpened into steel. Preston sat stone-faced, defeated, the weight of arrogance collapsing under evidence. Victoria collapsed into her chair, shoulders shaking not from grief, but from fear. From the realization that her perfect world cracked and the woman she underestimated stood to watch it fall. I turned slowly, cane tapping marble, each step measured not triumphant, but absolute. Pain radiated through ribs, knees, lungs, yet I stood taller than I ever had because survival is not measured in strength, but in refusal. Refusal to disappear. Refusal to surrender. Refusal to let those who tried to bury me write my ending. Cameras flashed, crowd murmured, and somewhere deep inside me something settled like a seed planted in soil, scorched by betrayal, ready to bloom into truth. Before I left, I breathed one last truth into that room, not out loud, but from the marrow of who I had become. They thought the crash killed me. Slowly, I decided to resurrect myself. And now, let me ask you something. If you had to walk into a room still hurting, still shaking, still healing, just to stand for what was right, would you do it? Comment Justice, if you'd keep standing even when you could barely breathe. The hallway outside the courtroom was quieter than the room I had just left, but the silence felt heavier, like walls holding breaths and marble floors, remembering footsteps of people who came here, believing power could shield them from consequence. I leaned lightly on my cane lungs, aching from effort ribs throbbing in dull pulses under my suit jacket. Cameras still flashed at the far end, reporters murmuring, but in this short stretch between courtroom doors and the elevator, time slowed like the world itself paused to acknowledge a reckoning. Sandra walked a few steps ahead, handling paperwork with the clerk, calm and focused, while Harper stood discreetly to the side, giving me space as if he knew some endings needed to unfold face to face. I closed my eyes for a moment, drawing in a breath, careful, controlled, victorious in its own small, painful way. I had stood, I had been seen, and I had not been erased. When I opened them, Victoria was there. She moved toward me too quickly for someone who had just watched her life tilt and crack, heels clicking like desperation, dragging dignity behind it. The security guard flanking the hallway stiffened, but she lifted her hand in a gesture of false surrender, as if she came in peace, as if peace still lived between us. Avery, sweetheart. Her voice trembled, rehearsed panic threaded with the same honey she once used to coat threats in sweetness. We can talk. Please. We can fix this. Fix this. Not apologize. Not accept truth. Not face what she had built with cold calculation. Fix it. Like my survival was an inconvenience she needed cleaned up, like my breath disrupted her pretty world, like I was a loose thread she came to snip again. I said nothing, letting her voice hang empty between us while she hurried closer, mascara shimmered tears that landed too quickly, too perfectly. I know it looks bad, she whispered urgently, leaning in just enough, her perfume soft floral layered over something sour beneath like guilt, trying to hide behind roses. But family goes through trials, sweetheart, and misunderstand. I lifted my hand, palm small but firm in the air, cutting her sentence the way one would silence a storm before it found wind. Sandra's head turned slightly, sensing movement, but she stayed back, trusting me to face the ghost on my own. Victoria's breath caught the same way it had when she first saw me alive in the courtroom, disbelief twisting her face into something brittle. "Avery," she pleaded, voice cracking just enough to sound tragic to someone who didn't know better. "You know I always cared. I was just overwhelmed, confused, scared for you. We can rebuild. We can move past this. Just sign a mutual agreement." And there it was, the heart of her panic. She wanted safety. She wanted silence. She wanted me to go away again, but this time voluntarily, so her reputation could stay intact and her world could return to the shape she forced it into. I straightened slowly, pain biting into my ribs, but spine rising like steel poured into bone. My voice stayed quiet, steady, the way truth sometimes whispers louder than anger ever could. "You stood over my grave before I was buried." Her face cracked, stunned horror rippling through her features, mascara smudging at the edges, tears drying mid-cheek, as if pride suddenly strangled emotion halfway out. "I did no such," she began, voice sharp, rising, reflexive like a snake snapping when cornered. I didn't move. "You filed to take what was mine. You watched my life collapse and celebrated it. You spent money while I lay on machines. You were already living in a world where I didn't exist." Each word, even calm, hit like a weight deliberately placed where lies couldn't outrun them. She shook her head fast, denial frantic, not because she was innocent, but because truth cornered her, and truth has sharp teeth. "You don't understand," she whispered, desperate voice cracking raw edges showing beneath the silk of her facade. "Life changes people. Money changes people. I didn't flinch." "Money didn't change me," I said quietly. "It revealed you." Her lips trembled, eyes glistening again, but this time panic replaced performance. She reached out, fingers shaking like she expected my hand to meet hers, like we were still pretending to be something resembling family. But instead, an officer stepped between us, firm, gentle, no aggression, only boundary. "Ma'am, you need to step back." She froze, hand suspended between us like an accusation, like a plea. Like a woman realizing she stood on the wrong side of memory and morality. "The judge ordered your removal from the estate matter and your access is restricted, effective immediately," the officer continued, voice flat. "Please exit the corridor." Her eyes filled this time. Not theatrics, not Instagram tears, but something raw and afraid, as if she finally felt the ground slip under her feet. Not because she lost money, but because she lost control. "Avery," she whispered again. Name breaking. I turned. Not cruel, not triumphant. Simply finished. Some endings don't need volume. The officer guided her gently but firmly away, heels stumbling slightly the first time I had ever seen her lose balance. As she was escorted down the hall, cameras spotted her, and reporters surged like ocean tide microphones, rising questions firing. "You tried to take her inheritance, didn't you? Did you know she was alive? Did you file the petition before confirming her condition? Do you regret your actions?" Her face tightened, tears smeared makeup, trembling lips. No words left that could soften truth. She tried to pull sunglasses from her bag, but attention holds its own gravity, and the hallway swallowed her dignity as she walked. I watched not to gloat, but to witness. Closure sometimes looks like someone walking away, escorted, not honored, exposed, not praised. When she disappeared around the corner, the hallway exhaled. Sandra returned to my side, voice soft. "You handled that perfectly." Harper approached, slow, fatherly pride shining beneath professionalism. "You honored your father," he murmured. I nodded, feeling breath move easier inside me despite aching ribs and trembling muscles. Some victories are quiet. Some justice looks like a woman standing on bruised legs, refusing to bend again. I pressed the elevator button, hand steady, cane firm, and whispered inside myself, not prayer, not revenge, just truth. You tried to end me, but I walked back into my life, and every step burns brighter than what you tried to bury. Tell me something. If life ever handed you the chance to face the person who tried to erase you, would you look them in the eye and walk past them while standing tall? Justice, when it finally arrives, does not always roar. Sometimes it settles like dawn, light, quiet, but undeniable, warming bruises you forgot you carried and clearing fog from places grief once lived. In the weeks after the hearing, life moved in deliberate, steady rhythms each day, another breath that belonged to me again. Court filings moved forward, not with spectacle, but precision. Charges were announced in neat legal language across documents stamped and sealed and delivered. Chase Coleman charged with credit card fraud, charged with unlawful access to personal belongings, charged under Georgia law for interference with estate assets. And though the words were softened by legal phrasing, one line in the prosecutor's summary cut sharper than any blade conspiracy to facilitate harm against primary beneficiary. They never used the ugliest term, but they didn't need to. Everyone understood. He had not expected consequences. People like Chase float through life believing rules exist for others. But the morning he was taken into custody in handcuffs, chin lifted like arrogance might save him. The world did not bend to his ego. Cameras caught the tremor he tried to hide, jaw-tense composure, cracking like porcelain under pressure. I didn't watch it live. I saw the clip later, muted first, then replayed with sound low. Not to savor it, but to witness truth finding its way. Victoria, for her part, did not face handcuffs. Consequences found her differently in ways she likely feared far more than a jail cell. Her country club membership vanished with a quiet board vote, the same people who once clapped her shoulder at charity luncheons now shaking heads, murmuring, "Poor judgment, how unfortunate, not one stepping in to shield her." Invitations stopped. Brunch tables shrank. Whisper circles grew. The kind of social exile that arrives without official decree, yet feels like doors slamming down every hallway you once floated through as though you owned them. When wealth circles turn on you, they do so swiftly and without ceremony. One former friend of hers, a woman who had smiled at me in passing years ago when I still tried to fit into their glittering world, sent me a message through Sandra's office. It said simply, "Some people drown in the reflection of the life they believe they deserve." I didn't respond. Some messages are complete without reply. The estate challenge evaporated like mist under sunlight. With my survival undeniable and intent exposed, the court-stamped denial swift and final. Funds released to me, property transferred, documents recorded. No ceremony, no applause. Just signatures and quiet truth sealed into law. Sandra sat across from me during the final review meeting, her focus sharp even in victory. "There is still the matter of civil remedy," she said, tone level, like she was asking if I wanted cream in my coffee. "We can pursue damages for emotional suffering, fraud damages, recovery of stolen funds, and reputational harm." The law was a map in her hands, and she offered paths like a guide who had seen every kind of battlefield. I studied the papers, edges crisp, names printed in stark black. My ribs still ached when I reached too far. My breathing still caught on cold mornings. My nightmares still lit highways beneath closed eyelids. But the hunger for vengeance had faded, replaced not with mercy, but peace. "I won," I said quietly. "I don't need to crush what's already crumbling." Sandra studied me long enough to understand it wasn't softness. It was closure. She nodded once and closed the folder. "You don't have to fight when you've already won." That afternoon, I sat on the small balcony of my temporary apartment, facing a quiet midtown street, watching dog walkers, joggers, families pushing strollers, life moving unbothered by courtroom echoes. My oxygen tank no longer needed. The cane still by my side, but my steps steadier each day. A Georgia breeze rolled soft from Piedmont Park, carrying magnolia sweetness. And I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Ease. Not because pain vanished, but because the weight of fear had finally loosened its grip. A week later, a Fox 5 Atlanta clip aired short, polished voices narrating the story the way news anchors do. Atlanta woman survives near fatal crash family, embroiled in estate misconduct allegations. A soft breath from the anchor on screen. Investigators confirm credit card misuse and estate interference. No names spoken beyond public filings, but viewers didn't need them. Truth has a way of pointing without shouting. I turned the volume down and let the screen flicker silently. Not because it hurt, but because I didn't need validation from a television voice. I had breathed through machines. I had stood in marble hallways while lies collapsed. I did not need more victory. Sometimes the truest victory is the quiet after chaos. Harper called that evening, his voice warm as always, with a small catch of emotion he didn't hide. "Your father would be proud." I closed my eyes, letting the words settle like soft rain. I hope so. He believed in strength he never forced. He gave love without calculation. And when he left, he gave me enough to build a life not to flaunt, but to live. Victoria learned wealth without integrity becomes sand. Chase learned charm cannot purchase character. And I learned survival is not just breath. It is choosing how to live once breathing becomes your own again. Some nights I still woke sweating, pulse racing at the memory of headlights too close, the sound of metal collapsing the silence of a hospital room where family never walked in. Trauma doesn't disappear. It transforms. But healing came too. Slow like sunrise, unnoticed until it filled the whole sky. I attended physical therapy until steps became effortless again. I met with a financial advisor not to chase luxury, but to build steadiness, to create a life where safety didn't come from people, but from choices. I donated a portion quietly to the ICU fund at Grady unsigned, because gratitude doesn't always need spotlight. I mailed a small handwritten note to Jackie at the hospital. "Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible." No signature. She would know. And I breathed easier knowing kindness could return without fanfare. On a quiet Thursday morning, I walked past the courthouse again, not to fight, but to remember who I had been when I entered and who I was now. A woman not defined by wounds, but by what she built from them. A woman who had stood when she could barely breathe. A woman they tried to erase, who chose instead to exist louder by simply living. The elevator doors across the lobby dinged softly, and for a second, fear flickered like an old reflex. But the doors opened to strangers, and the moment dissolved. That was then. This was now. Justice didn't feel like fireworks or applause. It felt like breath that didn't tremble. Steps that didn't fear collapse, a pulse steady in its own skin. Quiet power. And maybe that is the truest justice of all, not the fall of those who tried to break you, but the rise of the life they feared you would live. Tell me something, because this is where I finally exhaled without shaking, when justice comes softly instead of loudly. Do you feel it more, knowing your strength didn't need noise to exist? Peace does not arrive with applause or dramatic sunsets. It comes quietly like breath settling in a body that once fought just to stay alive. Months passed, and life softened around the edges, not erasing what happened, but placing it gently where memory no longer wounded, only informed. When I signed the papers for a small cottage near the Blue Ridge Mountains, I did it without ceremony. The house sat tucked between tall pines and rolling hills, porch wrapped around like open arms, morning fog curling across the valley like a blanket made of sky. It wasn't grand. It wasn't loud. It was exactly enough. A garden in the back where wildflowers grew without asking permission. A fireplace that crackled at dawn while I brewed quiet coffee. A single rocking chair I bought at a roadside woodshop on the way in, old man selling it smiling like he knew rest had a shape, and I had finally found it. Some days the mountains sat purple against the horizon, ancient and steady, as if reminding me that survival wasn't a miracle, but a duty I fulfilled step by step. Other mornings, rain whispered against the windows, and I listened like it was music because silence no longer frightened me. Silence meant I was living on my own terms. Jackie visited first. She drove up in an old SUV, windows down, gospel music floating out warm and familiar. When she stepped onto my porch, I hugged her, slow, mindful of ribs that still twinged sometimes, though less now. She laughed softly, eyes shining the way they did when she first watched me stand in rehab, shaking but determined. "Look at you," she said, hand resting briefly on my shoulder, standing tall and breathing free. I didn't tell her I still woke sometimes to shadows of headlights or the soft beeping of phantom hospital monitors. She knew already. Instead, I led her inside, made tea, listened as she told stories of new patients fighting their own quiet battles. Before she left, she pressed a small stone into my hand, smooth and warm. "For strength," she said, "or for remembering." "Both," I replied, "because strength needs memory to hold shape." Sandra came next, months later when court dust had settled and her schedule allowed time to breathe. She arrived in jeans and a soft sweater instead of power suits, hair, loose, eyes softer than I'd ever seen them in a courtroom glow. We sat on the porch as the sun dipped low, painting everything gold. "You know," she said halfway through her cup of tea, "most people I fight for fade out after the war ends. They disappear into lives they're building, and I rarely see them again." I looked at her a moment. "Do you miss them?" She shrugged slightly. "Sometimes, but I know they leave because they finally feel safe. You didn't fade. You didn't need to vanish to heal. You just built a life and kept those who stood with you." I smiled, small but full. Healing didn't mean leaving everything behind. It meant choosing what deserved to remain. That night when she drove away, headlights disappearing down the winding mountain road, I understood something I hadn't before. Survival gives you back yourself, but healing gives you back the world. With settlement funds secure, I created something that mattered more than numbers on a statement. A foundation supporting ICU survivors of trauma and sudden injury, especially those without family support systems. Grants for therapy, legal help, nurse aid programs, emergency housing for people who were discharged with nowhere safe to go. I named it quietly without attaching my story or face to it. Not anonymity, just humility. It wasn't built from revenge. It was built from gratitude. Money did not buy my healing. It allowed me to offer others the safety I once reached for in the dark and did not find. On weekends, I drove down winding mountain roads to the local farmer's market, bought apples from a widow who lived up the ridge, honey from a bearded man who smiled kindly without asking questions, flowers from a little girl who wrapped them with twine and pride. No one knew me here as the woman who returned from a courtroom standing on bruised legs. They knew me as the woman who waved at the mailman each morning and sat on her porch reading books about lives quieter than my own. I planted lavender by the walkway, rosemary near the kitchen, wild daisies along the fence. Flowers do not ask why you plant them, they simply grow when given chance. Some evenings I walked to the overlook behind my house and watched fog rise from the valley like breath from the earth itself. The quiet felt earned, now not empty. Peace wasn't the absence of memory, but the presence of meaning. Sometimes I thought of Victoria not with anger, but with distance the way one thinks of a storm after rebuilding the house it tried to tear down. I did not follow her life. I did not care who still spoke to her or who pretended not to see her in grocery aisles. Her world was hers to rebuild if she chose. Her downfall was not my purpose. My life was. And as seasons shifted over the mountain ridge, as summer stretched green and fall burned gold across the hills, I realized I had not risen for revenge. I had risen because life waited for me, because strength demanded breath, because I refused to fade where others hoped I would disappear. Money didn't change them, it revealed them. And I didn't rise for revenge. I rose for myself. Now tell me something. Where are you watching from? And tell me, would you forgive family that tried to bury you alive or walk away forever?